Emma Brooks arrived at the office at exactly 8:28 a.m., like she did every morning, 2 minutes early. She slipped past the security gate with a quick beep of her ID card, head down, steps light. Her black flats made no sound against the polished tile, and her beige cardigan blended in with the walls. She was a ghost by design, a background character in the daily corporate buzz of Hawthorne and Miles advertising. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. She stepped in alone, pressed the 17th floor, and sighed as the doors closed. She checked her phone. "Alex, eat lunch. Now." She smiled a little despite herself. It was 8:31. Typical. The elevator opened to the buzzing marketing floor. Rows of sleek white desks spread out like a chessboard. Emma weaved through the maze, offering small polite nods to people who didn't look up from their screens. She didn't mind. The fewer the eyes, the easier her life was. Her desk was near the back, wedged between the overwatered office fern and the intern station. The air was always a bit colder there, and the fluorescent light above her flickered twice every hour. Emma had long learned to ignore it. She sat down, opened her planner, and started her day with her usual checklist. Organize client pitch slides, follow up on invoice correction for Midpoint Retail, check latest analytics from online campaign, stay invisible. She added that last line half-jokingly, half. "Morning," mumbled Jake from accounting as he passed by, not really looking at her. She waved back silently. He didn't wait for a reply. No one really did. Emma liked it that way. People often mistook quiet for weakness, but she considered it a superpower. The less people knew about her, the more she saw of them. The gossip, the petty rivalries, the alliances formed over coffee machine chats. She had a front row seat to it all, and they never even noticed her. She tapped open her emails and got to work. Her fingers moved fast over the keyboard, her brain 2 steps ahead. Years ago, she would have felt frustrated, being overlooked, never invited to brainstorming sessions, never acknowledged for her ideas. But that was before she made peace with her role, and before she made a choice, the choice to stay. Emma adjusted her glasses and glanced at the clock. 9:04 a.m. Right on cue, her phone buzzed again. "Alex, did you sleep?" She smirked, typing a quick reply. "Eventually. Don't worry, CEO. I'm functioning." His reply was instant. "You're not an android. Get up and walk every hour." She rolled her eyes, but her lips curled up faintly. This was how they communicated during work hours. Short texts, no emojis, no pet names, just clipped check-ins and quiet concern dressed up as commands. And no one in this office had any idea. To everyone else, Alexander Miles, the elusive, sharp-suited CEO who rarely descended from his executive floor, was just the name behind the glass wall. A man too focused to bother with assistants or interns or juniors like her. And Emma? Just another lower-ranked staff with discount clothes and a homemade lunchbox. The perfect camouflage. She took out her thermos and placed it beside her keyboard. The instant noodles she brought for later were tucked away in her bottom drawer. She liked simple things, easy things, things she could control. Just then, a loud laugh echoed across the floor. A group of employees gathered around someone's desk. Emma didn't need to look to know it was the new intern team showing off TikToks again. She returned to her work, clicking through the analytics dashboard like a pianist playing an old, familiar song. Across the floor, someone tossed a stapler a little too hard. Someone else groaned over a printer jam. Phones rang, keys clacked. Emma moved through the noise without letting any of it stick. But as she typed, she glanced toward the glass-walled boardroom near the front of the floor. It was empty now, but soon it would be filled with execs, and sometimes, if she was lucky, he would show up. Alex. They had agreed on the arrangement from the start. Keep it private, keep it quiet. Not because he was ashamed, but because Emma didn't want the circus, didn't want the stares or the assumptions. She wanted to earn her place on her own terms, not as Mrs. CEO. And for the past 2 years, that's exactly what she did. She wasn't climbing ladders or chasing promotions. She didn't need to. Her quiet victories were enough. Helping close the Midpoint Retail account? That was her. Fixing the Dazzle campaign's failing budget projections last quarter? Also her. Not that anyone knew. And she didn't mind. Mostly. A few hours passed in quiet, efficient bursts. She took a quick walk around the floor at 11:15 as instructed. Got some water, listened in on the HR assistant ranting about vacation approvals, then returned to her seat like a ghost slipping back into place. By noon, the office buzz picked up. People left for lunch in groups, comparing sandwich orders and poking fun at the cafeteria options. Emma stayed behind as usual, quietly pouring hot water into her instant noodles and returning to her screen. And once again, her phone buzzed. "Alex, let me guess, instant noodles again?" She replied with a picture of her cup, steam rising lazily. Emma, guilty. "You married me anyway." His response took a little longer this time. "I'd marry you all over again, even if you brought noodles to our wedding." She looked down at the screen for a while, cheeks warming slightly. Then she tucked the phone away and picked up her fork. No one noticed her soft smile. No one saw the flicker of affection behind her eyes. To the office, Emma Brooks was just a quiet, unremarkable junior assistant. And that was exactly how she planned it. For now. Monday mornings at Hawthorne and Miles were usually slow to start. People trickled in with coffees in hand, yawning behind computer screens, still half asleep from the weekend. But today was different. There was a buzz, soft at first, like static in the air, then louder. Voices, whispers, footsteps moving quicker than usual. Emma noticed the change before she even looked up. Her fingers paused over her keyboard as a pair of sharp, clicking heels echoed through the office corridor. She turned her head slightly, just enough to catch the commotion by the elevator. There she was. Brielle Carter stepped out as though she had just walked off a magazine cover. Her blazer was perfectly tailored, cinched at the waist, paired with sky-high heels that could have doubled as weapons. Her hair was long, dark, and glossy, not a strand out of place. Her bag, a designer one Emma had only seen in ads, rested easily on her shoulder as if she wasn't even aware of its price tag. All eyes followed her. The interns nudged each other. The marketing team stared openly. Someone from HR mouthed, "Wow." Emma blinked and looked back at her screen. A second later, her desk neighbor, Tara, leaned toward her and whispered behind her hand, "That's her, Brielle Carter, the new senior exec. Rumor is she transferred from the Singapore branch after tripling their Q4 revenue." Emma gave a small nod, pretending to care. She was used to big entrances, showy titles, and office gossip. It would die down in a few days. "She's got eyes on Alex," Tara added with a grin, lowering her voice further. Emma didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her eyes remained on her spreadsheet, but her mind wandered for a second. Of course she does. Everyone always did. It wasn't new or surprising. Alexander Miles had that kind of presence. Sharp suit, serious expression, and a voice that could silence a room. People admired him, envied him, desired him. But Emma knew the version of him that wore worn-out sweatpants at home and secretly liked instant mashed potatoes. Still, the idea of Brielle having eyes on him didn't bother her. What did was the faint whiff of arrogance she picked up from across the room. That confidence wasn't confidence. It was calculation. Sure enough, by noon, Brielle had already done a lap around the office, introduced herself to the key departments, complimented the design team, and made 3 people feel intimidated without raising her voice. And then she arrived at Emma's desk. "Hi," she said, flashing a white-toothed smile. "You're?" Emma stood politely. "Emma. I handle client follow-ups and analytics for regional accounts." "Ah," Brielle said, eyes scanning her up and down. "The one tucked behind the fern." Emma nodded, unbothered. "That's me." Brielle smiled again, but this time with a tilt to her head. "I like your setup. Very quiet." There was something in her tone, something Emma recognized. Thinly veiled judgment wrapped in a compliment. Emma only smiled back. Just as Brielle turned to leave, her eyes landed on the little coffee pod box Emma kept beside her desk. "Oh," Brielle said lightly, "you still use discount coffee pods?" Emma blinked once. Her hand twitched slightly beside her mug. "They're efficient," she replied calmly. "Do the job." Brielle chuckled, then walked away, heels clicking like a clock ticking. Emma sat back down slowly, her fingers brushing against the coffee pod box. Discount pods. Sure, they weren't great. They tasted like watered-down ambition. But they worked, and she didn't need more than that. Still, the way Brielle said it, it wasn't about the coffee. It never was. By the end of the day, Brielle had taken over the corner glass office previously used for executive guests. She'd also scheduled a casual brainstorm session for Thursday, added herself to 3 team group chats, and asked for access to the project management board just to get familiar. Emma said nothing. She observed everything. Over the next few days, Brielle's presence became a performance. She walked with intent. She laughed, just loud enough to be heard from across the room. She made small comments in meetings that were just this side of cutting. And she took every opportunity to remind people of her credentials, her international experience, her network, her previous success. Emma didn't get in her way. She didn't need to. She watched from the sidelines, listening to the way Brielle complimented Alex's leadership style in meetings, how she strategically chose the seat next to him at briefings, how she lingered a second longer when handing him documents. It was subtle, professional, and predictable. And Emma, she just smiled, because Alex didn't even look up from his notes. If Brielle noticed that, she didn't show it. But what she did notice, what she kept noticing, was Emma. Small things at first. "You don't speak up much during meetings," Brielle said one afternoon with a faux concerned tone. "I prefer to listen," Emma replied simply. "You take notes by hand? That's very quaint." Emma only smiled. "Helps me remember." Every jab was carefully packaged in civility. No yelling, no open confrontation, just little cuts, death by 1,000 words. One afternoon, when the team gathered for lunch around the shared table, Brielle gestured at Emma's lunchbox. "What's that? Homemade again?" she said, smiling innocently. "You're so disciplined. I'd die without at least 3 Postmates deliveries a week." Emma glanced down at her rice and boiled vegetables. "I guess I'm hard to kill." A few people chuckled softly. Brielle's smile tightened. Emma knew the game. She had played it before, years ago, in different rooms with different people. Back when she first helped Alex build the company from scratch. Back when she worked until 3 in the morning so the team could pitch on time. She'd walked through worse storms than Brielle Carter. But this time, she wasn't going to fight. Not yet. She was going to let Brielle believe she'd won. Let her grow comfortable in her arrogance. Let her think the quiet girl with the discount coffee pods was just another invisible employee. Until she wasn't. Emma started keeping track, not in a dramatic, vengeance-driven way, but in the quiet, efficient manner she handled most things. She had a notes folder buried deep in her phone labeled Client Patterns, but it now contained a hidden subfolder titled Queen Bee, and every entry was a small record: date, time, setting, and the exact phrasing of Brielle Carter's latest passive-aggressive remark. March 14th to 9:42 a.m., hallway near printing station. "Oh, Emma, you're printing in black and white again? Saving the environment or just the ink budget?" March 16th to 1:13 p.m., lunch table. "I admire your consistency. Instant noodles again? You must be so good at budgeting." March 18th, 10:05 a.m., weekly project check-in. Emma's ideas are sweet, simple, but sweet. Sometimes we all need a bit of humble thinking, don't we? To the untrained ear, they were harmless, friendly even. But Emma knew better. These weren't comments, they were tools. Words chosen carefully, made to chip away, one piece at a time. She never responded. Not really. A smile here, a nod there. Her expression never changed. But in her head, her thoughts were alive and well. "Yes, I print in black and white. You'd know about contrast if you ever submitted a design that wasn't all glitter and no structure. Or, that's right, instant noodles. And your salad costs 3 times more, but has half the nutrients. And honestly, still smells like regret." But no one heard these comebacks. Not yet. They stayed tucked away like the silk blouse she never wore at work or the real title on her marriage certificate. Each time Brielle struck, Emma sharpened her patience like a blade she wasn't ready to unsheath. And through it all, Alex remained in the background, appearing in brief flashes during executive meetings, his face unreadable. To most employees, he was a storm contained in a man, focused, stern, and unreachable. When he entered a room, conversation quieted. When he asked a question, people straightened up. He didn't smile, didn't joke, didn't entertain unnecessary chatter, even with Brielle, though she tried. "Mr. Miles," Brielle said one morning during a strategy briefing, her voice lilting just enough, "I was thinking, your leadership style is so quietly dominant. Has anyone ever told you that?" Emma looked up just in time to catch the corner of Alex's mouth twitch, almost imperceptible. "No," he replied coolly, "and now they have." Brielle chuckled like it was flirtation. Emma knew better. That was Alex's shut-it-down tone. She had heard it countless times, when vendors tried to upsell nonsense, when investors got too bold, and once when someone called her just his assistant during a cocktail event. But no one in the room noticed, except Emma. She returned to her notes, fingers calm, expression neutral. Later that day, in the break room, Brielle entered while Emma waited for the microwave to finish spinning her lunch. "Emma," she said casually, pouring almond milk into her imported organic coffee, "you should really try oat milk sometime. Less processed." Emma stirred her noodles. "It's powdered soup and carbs, Brielle. I think we're way past saving my diet." The microwave beeped. Emma removed her bowl with a cloth napkin and turned without waiting for a reply. She didn't look back, but she heard it. Brielle's pause, the quick inhale of someone who expected a different kind of response. At her desk, Emma quietly added another note to her Queen Bee file. Today's victory, 20 seconds of stunned silence. She smiled slightly and clicked back into her project dashboard. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. She didn't care for petty fights or ego wars. But there was something satisfying in watching Brielle grow more confused by the day. The way she'd flick her hair and scan Emma's desk, clearly trying to figure her out. Emma knew what she looked like. Simple blouse, messy bun, budget lunch. But every time Brielle made a dig, Emma never flinched. She never bit back, never cried, never shrank. That, more than anything, made Brielle uncomfortable, and it would only get worse, because what Brielle didn't know, couldn't even imagine, was that the man she was aiming her charm at so persistently, the man she lingered next to after meetings, the man she once whispered about over wine at the company mixer, "I wouldn't mind climbing that ladder," was Emma's husband. Emma had heard that story secondhand from Tara, who had overheard it from someone in events. She had only smiled and added it to the mental scrapbook she was building. She imagined showing Alex one day. He'd roll his eyes, maybe laugh, then pull her closer the way he always did when the world got a little loud. But for now, she stayed quiet. She kept watching, she kept waiting, because the longer Brielle underestimated her, the sweeter the truth would taste when it finally came out. The restaurant was upscale and softly lit, with velvet booths and tall glasses that caught the golden glow of the chandeliers above. It was the kind of place where dishes had names longer than the ingredients list, and where ordering water still came with a choice, sparkling or still. It was Friday, and the team had gathered to celebrate the landing of a new tech client. Emma wasn't originally on the guest list, but someone in HR had insisted everyone from the regional accounts team be included. So she went, not to socialize, but to observe. That had always been her strength, seeing without being seen. She arrived in a simple navy blouse, nothing too fancy, paired with beige trousers and a low bun. Most of her colleagues were already there, drinks in hand, conversations floating over appetizers. She slipped quietly into a seat near the end of the long table, avoiding the center where the noise always clumped. Brielle, of course, was seated near the middle, flanked by junior managers like satellites orbiting a star. Her laughter was the loudest, her glass never empty. Emma barely touched her wine. She picked at her food politely, listening to the chatter. Brielle was in high form, recalling some tale from her Singapore days about saving a campaign with one bold pitch and a tight red dress. Everyone laughed on cue. Then, halfway through dessert, things shifted. Someone suggested a toast. Glasses clinked. Brielle stood up, swaying slightly from the alcohol, and announced, "To bold women who dress well, work hard, and don't settle for microwave noodles." More laughter. Emma smiled thinly, nodding along. She had grown used to Brielle's little jabs, always hidden behind general statements, always just vague enough to avoid blame. Then Brielle walked around the table, refilling wine like she was hosting. When she reached Emma's end, she leaned closer, too sweet, too slow. "Oops," she said, just as her glass tilted forward, splashing a generous pour of red wine onto Emma's shirt. The stain spread quickly over the fabric, dark, unforgiving. Gasps rippled around them. "Oh my God, Emma, I'm so sorry," Brielle said with mock horror. Then with a grin, added, "But I mean, it's not like that top was expensive, right?" Laughter bubbled again, this time more awkward. Emma froze for a moment. Her fingers twitched slightly beside her lap. That tiny movement, barely noticeable, was the first crack in her carefully constructed calm. She looked down at the stain, then up at Brielle. "It's fine," she said softly. It's just fabric. She stood, still composed, and excused herself. No anger, no scene. She walked to the restroom, rinsed the worst of the wine under cool water, and dried it with stiff paper towels. Her reflection in the mirror stared back. Damp collar, red blotch spreading like a bruise, eyes steady. She didn't cry. Not here. Not over this. But inside, something hardened. Something shifted. She returned to the table 10 minutes later, quieter than usual. When people looked at her, their smiles were tighter, unsure. Maybe they had seen the moment for what it was, a power play dressed as clumsiness. Brielle didn't apologize again. She just winked. Emma smiled once more. Her teeth showed this time, though her eyes didn't. The dinner dragged on. She left early, claiming a headache, and caught a cab home. By the time she got to the apartment, it was nearly midnight. The city outside was quiet, the skyline twinkling in the distance. Their penthouse was dark except for a low light in the kitchen. She slipped out of her shoes, walked into the hallway, and saw Alex standing there, arms crossed, tie loosened. He looked at her shirt first, then at her face. What happened? Emma hesitated. Someone spilled wine. His jaw clenched slightly. Who? Does it matter? She asked lightly, brushing past him to grab a towel and start dabbing at the stain again. Yes, he said. She looked up at him. His brows were furrowed, the crease in his forehead deeper than usual. His voice was even, but the cold edge beneath it was unmistakable. Emma forced a smile. It's fine, just a clumsy moment. These things happen. You never wear navy, he said quietly. You liked that shirt. She paused, then looked back at the stain. Her fingers stopped moving. Alex stepped closer. Emma, I said I'm fine, she interrupted, too quickly. Silence hung between them. She wasn't angry, not at him, but she didn't want him to see it. The humiliation, the sting, the slow boil of being treated like less than nothing in front of people who should have known better. Alex watched her for a long moment, then nodded once and stepped back. He didn't push. He never did. But she knew he didn't believe her. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, eyes open in the dark, replaying the moment in her head. The splash, the laugh, the way Brielle had looked at her, not with regret but triumph. That was the moment Emma realized something. This wasn't just pettiness. This was strategy. Brielle wasn't simply mean. She was calculating. She had noticed that Emma was untouchable in a strange way, always immune to confrontation. And now, she was testing the limits. Emma turned to face the ceiling, hand resting lightly on the now dried stain. She had wanted to stay invisible, but Brielle was slowly forcing her out of the shadows. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let her. The next morning was unusually still. Emma stood in the kitchen of their penthouse, watching the sunlight spill across the marble counter. The apartment was quiet except for the soft sound of eggs sizzling in the pan. She was barefoot, her hair down, her movements relaxed and practiced. Here, she was different. There was no cardigan, no clipboard, no discount coffee pods, only soft cotton pajamas and a confident, focused calm that didn't need to hide. Alex walked in minutes later, sleeves rolled, hair damp from a shower, a hint of sleep still clinging to his eyes. His expression softened the moment he saw her. You're up early. So are you, Emma replied without looking up, flipping the eggs. He walked over, leaned on the counter, and watched her. Couldn't sleep. I know, she said simply. He reached for a mug, poured coffee, and handed it to her wordlessly. She took it with a small smile and sipped. He didn't ask again about the wine incident. That was their rhythm, unspoken understanding woven between routines. But she felt the question still lingering in the air. They sat across from each other at the kitchen island, eating in silence. Occasionally, Alex would reach over to add more butter to her toast or refill her glass of water. Small gestures, not because she needed them, but because that was his way of being near. Emma glanced at him. The same man who in the office was unreadable and remote. But here he was quieter in a different way, open, steady, present. Her mind wandered to the beginning, before all the silence, before the glass walls and investor meetings, before he was Mr. Miles. Back then, 5 years ago, Alex wasn't powerful. He was tired, drowning actually. Emma had been working as a freelance strategist fresh out of grad school, hopping between brands and startups, earning just enough to keep the lights on in her cramped studio apartment. That's when she got a call, an unpaid consulting favor from a friend of a friend. A small agency, Hawthorne & Miles, was on the brink of collapse. The founders had parted ways, investors were pulling out, and the CEO, a sharp but burnt-out 29-year-old named Alex Miles, was out of time. Emma had walked into that office carrying a backpack and a laptop with missing keys. She listened for 2 hours without interrupting. Then she started asking questions no one had dared to ask. Why are you targeting tech clients when your strongest campaigns are lifestyle brands? Why is your best designer buried under admin work? Why are you burning investor money on strategies you don't believe in? Alex had stared at her for a long time, jaw tight, but didn't argue. By the end of that week, she had rewritten the brand strategy, fired 2 consultants, and pitched a rebranding campaign that doubled their web traffic in 3 months. He paid her nothing for the first month. She stayed anyway. They didn't fall in love overnight. They worked late nights, argued over coffee ratios, rebuilt teams from scratch, and earned loyalty from employees who were ready to jump ship. He respected her mind. She respected his grit. The romance came later, like a quiet flame that had always been there, but finally caught fire. When the company finally turned a profit again, Emma had a choice. Alex offered her a permanent executive role, co-founder credit, a corner office with her name on the door, and she turned it down. "I don't want the spotlight," she had told him back then. "I want peace. I'll still be around. You'll still need me. But I want to choose when I step forward." He hadn't argued. He knew her well enough by then. So she took a step back. She chose the quieter path, the assistant title, the unnoticed desk, the instant noodles, because it let her observe, build, plan without pressure. Until now. Alex's voice pulled her back to the present. She's getting bolder. Emma looked up. "Brielle?" He nodded. "I'm fine," she said. "Emma?" She exhaled. "It's not that I'm hurt. It's that she thinks she's untouchable, that she can say anything to anyone because no one will stop her. She uses charm like a blade and hides behind it when people flinch." Alex's jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to fix everything with one email. "She's your employee, not mine," Emma added gently. "If you step in now, it'll look like favoritism." "Maybe I don't care what it looks like." "I do," she said. "And you promised." He hesitated, then nodded. "I did." They had agreed long ago that no matter what happened in the office, their relationship would stay separate. No hand-holding during meetings, no special treatment, and certainly no boss's wife privileges. Emma stood and carried her plate to the sink. Let her talk. Let her dig. The deeper the hole, the harder the fall. "You sound like you're planning something." She turned, lips curving. "I'm not planning anything." Pause. "Yet." Alex smiled, the rare kind, the one that softened the sharp lines of his face. He stood, walked over, and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I still think you'd look good in the CEO chair," he murmured. "I already do," she replied, not missing a beat. "Just not from where everyone expects." He laughed once, low and warm, then kissed her temple. They stayed like that for a moment, quiet, steady, a team. Outside, the city woke up. Somewhere, Brielle Carter was probably sipping imported espresso and choosing a new outfit to impress the man who had already chosen someone else long ago. And Emma? She was already 3 steps ahead. Monday morning brought back the usual buzz. Desks filled up, coffee machines hummed, and the low drone of morning chatter returned to the marketing floor of Hawthorne and Miles. Emma arrived right on time, a thermos of tea in hand and her quiet presence slipping back into place like a piece of furniture no one ever thought to move. But today, Emma had a new tab open on her laptop. Not for numbers or pitch slides. Something private. Hidden beneath folders marked archival and logistics, she started a quiet compilation labeled simply, Observation Notes. Not because she was vengeful, but because lately, curiosity had turned into concern. Brielle had been getting sloppy. Emma noticed the first red flag during the internal pitch review last Thursday. Brielle had presented a campaign deck for a client launch, shiny, over-designed, and overflowing with vague buzzwords like synergy and revolutionize. But Emma had seen those visuals before. Almost identical mock-ups had floated around 6 months ago in a failed pitch rejected by a skincare brand in New York. That pitch had flopped. Brielle had just polished it up and renamed the product. Emma noted it down. The next came during a team huddle. Brielle subtly reassigned an intern's design draft to someone else, someone in her circle. She claimed the original was too basic, but Emma had reviewed it earlier. It was clean, targeted, and aligned with the client's demographic. Emma took screenshots. Then came the hallway whisper. Two junior analysts stood near the snack station, whispering about how Brielle had told them to tweak the data from the latest user engagement report before presenting it. Just enough to make it sparkle for investors. They were young, unsure. One said, "She's senior. She must know what she's doing." Emma didn't interrupt. She just wrote it down. She didn't plan to act yet. Not because she doubted herself, but because timing mattered. She wasn't just building a folder. She was building a pattern. People needed proof, not opinions. Meanwhile, Brielle continued her theater. Every meeting was an opportunity. She made sure to sit near Alex, her voice loudest during brainstorms, her compliments wrapped in flirtation. "Mr. Miles, your direction always cuts through the noise." "Mr. Miles, you're so decisive. It's refreshing." She drew out his name like it was a prize ribbon, her smile lingering a second too long. Emma, sitting at the far end of the table, simply sipped her tea. In her head, she had renamed Brielle weeks ago Lady Peacock. All feathers, all show, no substance. The nickname helped. Every time Brielle leaned forward dramatically in a presentation, every time she twirled her pen or flicked her hair or strategically laughed at a not-that-funny comment from Alex, Emma would quietly mutter in her mind, "Strut, Lady Peacock, strut." Alex, to his credit, remained completely unfazed. His responses were clipped, professional, and distant. He never encouraged the attention. But he didn't stop it either. Not because he enjoyed it, but because he was trying to respect the walls Emma had asked him to keep up. He never once glanced in her direction during meetings, never lingered near her desk, never treated her any differently than any other junior account assistant. And still, Emma saw everything. Brielle's arrogance was growing. She had started speaking over other colleagues in meetings, rewriting task assignments without approval, and using words like streamline and realign as excuses to bulldoze ideas that weren't hers. One afternoon, Emma caught her trying to rebrand a long-term campaign, one Emma herself had built from scratch 3 years ago, under a pseudonym during her consulting phase. Brielle presented the same skeleton, slapped with a new title and bolder font. Emma didn't even blink. She saved the new deck file quietly. The metadata still had her watermark. Later that evening, Emma walked into their apartment, removed her flats, and placed her bag down slowly. Alex was already home, first in a hoodie and glasses, going over board reports at the kitchen counter. She sat beside him, wordlessly opened her laptop, and turned the screen toward him. He scrolled. Quiet, calm, each screenshot, each comment, each copied slide. After a while, he exhaled slowly. "She's not just arrogant," he murmured. "She's dangerous." Emma nodded. "Not to me, but to the team and the clients." He looked at her. "You're not going to report her yet, are you?" She shook her head. "Not yet. She's still digging her hole." "Let her finish. Then it won't be my words. It'll be hers. Recorded, dated, stamped." Alex smiled faintly. "You're terrifying." Emma smiled back. "You married me." He leaned over and kissed the top of her head gently. Emma closed the laptop, her hand resting on the lid. She didn't feel angry or vindictive, just steady. Some people needed lessons, others needed consequences. Brielle was about to learn both. The conference room on the 17th floor was unusually full that morning. Every chair was taken, extra ones pulled in from nearby desks. The air buzzed with polite tension, the kind that came before big presentations. It was time for the quarterly creative review, a full department showcase of upcoming campaign ideas. Emma sat quietly at the far side of the long oval table, a neat folder in front of her, a modest clicker in hand. Her pitch was simple, a targeted, data-driven campaign for a local eco-friendly fashion brand. No glitz, no sweeping promises, just clean numbers and honest strategy. It had taken her 3 weeks, 2 all-nighters, and a fair amount of caffeine. She was second to present, right after the intern team. She walked up, spoke clearly, explained the client needs, offered visuals, metrics, and examples of real engagement. She didn't oversell. She didn't need to. It was a pitch rooted in actual client history and market behavior. When she finished, there was a small wave of polite nods. Tara even gave her a thumbs up from the back. Then Brielle stood. She strutted to the front like she was taking the stage at a TED Talk. Her slides burst to life, saturated colors, dramatic fonts, looping background music. The campaign? a supposed original idea for a cosmetic company, bold, glamorous, and dripping with jargon. But Emma recognized the bones, the layout, the slogans, even the taglines. They weren't Brielle's. They were recycled from a failed pitch in their shared archive, one Emma had quietly saved and flagged weeks ago. The content had been buried for good reason. The client had rejected it, harshly. Brielle had just dusted it off, repackaged it, and renamed it Dare to Bear 2.0. Still, the visuals dazzled. The room clapped louder than before. One manager even muttered, "That's got flair." Emma didn't move. She didn't speak. She only sat still and silent, her fingers laced in her lap. Her expression remained calm, but inside, something deep and sharp stirred. She could have raised her hand, could have stood up and listed every asset that wasn't original, every file name that matched, every campaign reference Brielle had mined. She had proof, but she didn't. Not yet, because this wasn't the moment to make noise. It was the moment to take note. The meeting dragged on another hour. People shuffled out in groups, whispering and analyzing. Brielle stayed near the center, basking in the attention, answering questions like a seasoned speaker after a sold-out show. Emma moved toward the exit, careful to avoid the crowd. That's when Brielle's voice sliced through the chatter. "Emma!" she called out. Everyone turned. Emma stopped, turning halfway, brows lifted slightly. Brielle smiled, holding a paper cup in one hand, the other gesturing casually. "Next time," she said, her voice light, sugary, and cutting. "Maybe bring an idea, not just a warm chair." There was a beat of silence. Then someone chuckled. Then two more. It wasn't loud laughter, but it was enough. Emma's fingers twitched. Her lips remained in their neutral line, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. Alex, seated at the back during the whole session, stood slowly. He hadn't spoken during the presentation, keeping his role distant and executive. But now his body stilled, jaw set tight. His expression didn't change, but Emma caught the flicker, just a small one in his eyes. The kind of flicker that usually preceded action. She gave a barely noticeable shake of her head. Not yet. Brielle turned, still smiling like she'd just delivered a clever joke. Her heels clicked as she walked away, confidence rolling off her like perfume. Emma exhaled. The comment didn't sting. Not because it wasn't cruel, but because it proved something. Brielle had stopped pretending. The attacks were no longer veiled. She was starting to feel untouchable, which meant the timing was almost perfect. Later that evening, Emma sat on the couch, legs tucked under her, laptop open, reviewing client data. Alex emerged from his office, no tie, sleeves rolled. "She did it again," he said, sitting beside her. Emma didn't look up. "I know. I wanted to say something. I saw." He waited, watching her fingers move over the trackpad. "She's walking right into it," Emma said calmly. "Everything she's done, everything she's said, I have it all. Timestamps, slides, recordings, internal edits. Even the intern she stole the last draft from has emailed me with her original designs. She's exposed." Emma closed the laptop and finally looked at him. "Almost," she said. "One more push. I want it public. I want her words to be the nail in the coffin." Alex leaned back, silent for a while. "You're colder than me sometimes," he murmured. Emma smiled. "I learned from the best." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You don't have to prove anything. I'm not doing this for me," she said softly. "I'm doing it for every intern she's silenced, every analyst she's blamed, every assistant she humiliated. I stayed quiet long enough, but she made the mistake of dragging me into the light." Alex nodded, holding her hand tighter. Emma glanced at the clock. "Let her enjoy tomorrow," she added. "Because after that, I'm done watching." The ballroom shimmered under golden chandeliers, dressed in silver linens and soft jazz humming from the live quartet in the corner. Waiters floated between guests, with flutes of champagne and trays of hors d'oeuvres, their black uniforms crisp, their steps nearly silent. The annual Hawthorne and Miles Gala was the event of the year, where deals were quietly discussed behind wine glasses and reputations could rise or crumble by the end of the night. Emma arrived alone. She stepped out of the hired black car, dressed in a simple but elegant slate gray gown that hugged at the waist and flowed softly at her ankles. No sequins, no plunging necklines. Her hair was swept into a clean chignon, her makeup minimal. There was no designer label screaming for attention, just quiet refinement. The kind that didn't beg to be noticed, but made it hard to look away once someone did. As she entered the hall, the hum of voices washed over her. No one greeted her at first. A few glanced her way with polite confusion, as if trying to place her. Was she someone's date? A PR assistant? Maybe part of the catering team? Given her understated dress? And then came the voice. "Well, if it isn't our mystery guest," Brielle said with a wide grin, stepping into her path near the welcome table. Emma stopped. Brielle looked her over, from the neckline of her gown to the low heels she wore with unapologetic comfort. Her own dress sparkled with rhinestones, tight at the hips, dramatically slit at the thigh. She wore confidence like perfume, loud and lingering. "I didn't know Goodwill started a gala collection," Brielle added, smirking just enough for nearby guests to hear. A few heads turned. One man from accounts laughed nervously. Another woman sipped her wine and looked away. Emma looked at Brielle with the calmness of someone holding a secret. She reached out, picked up a fresh champagne flute from a passing tray, and raised it slightly in Brielle's direction. "That's a clever line. You've been practicing, haven't you?" Brielle blinked, lips parting just slightly. Emma turned to walk away, but the crowd shifted suddenly. At the front of the ballroom, near the grand staircase, the microphone hummed to life. A familiar, quiet voice filled the space. "Good evening, everyone." The room stilled. All heads turned toward the stage, where Alex Miles stood in his classic black suit, hands steady over the podium. His presence was magnetic, not because he demanded attention, but because the absence of noise around him always invited it. Emma paused mid-step, eyes lifting toward him. Alex scanned the room once, then gave a nod. "Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate another year of growth, resilience, and creativity. Our team has endured challenges, achieved milestones, and built something truly exceptional. But tonight, I want to take a moment not to speak about numbers or strategies." He paused, glancing once across the ballroom, "but about people, about someone in particular." The crowd shifted, murmurs starting again. Emma's heart thudded once, then went quiet. Alex continued, his tone firm but composed. "There's someone here tonight that many of you may not recognize for what she's done, because she never wanted the spotlight. Someone who worked tirelessly behind the scenes long before this company had investors, before the awards, before we ever signed our first national client." He turned his eyes directly toward Emma. "My wife, Emma Miles." Gasps rippled through the room like electricity. A few guests turned sharply to find her, eyes wide, mouths open. Brielle froze completely, the blood draining from her face in a slow, visible wave. Emma stayed still, champagne glass in hand. Alex stepped down from the podium and walked through the crowd with measured ease, stopping only when he reached her. Without saying a word, he offered her his hand. She took it. He pulled her gently beside him and faced the guests once more. "I'm standing here today because of her," he said quietly. "She's the reason this company survived when it was only a name and an unpaid invoice. She's written more strategies than some of us realize, and she has endured more than most would in silence." He looked directly at Brielle. "There are those among us who confuse arrogance with leadership, who climb by stepping on others. But tonight, I want to remind everyone, the people worth respecting are rarely the loudest in the room." Silence. No clinking of glasses, no polite coughs, just the sound of reality catching up with the whispering mouths. Emma turned slightly, scanning the sea of stunned expressions. Some were embarrassed, some were apologetic, others, like Brielle, were simply shocked into stillness. Emma finally broke the silence, with a smile, not a smirk, not a grin of revenge, but a soft, peaceful one. "I guess this dress wasn't from Goodwill after all," she said, voice clear and warm. There was a ripple of restrained laughter from the crowd. Light, awkward, but cleansing. Brielle didn't speak. She couldn't. Emma leaned toward Alex and whispered, "Now they know." He nodded once. "They do." They stayed for the rest of the gala, not flaunting, not parading, just present. A quiet storm in a room that suddenly understood who they had been underestimating all along. And Brielle? She didn't leave immediately, but she didn't enjoy the night either. Every glance her way came with a new understanding. She stood in the glittering spotlight she had always wanted, but now it felt too hot. Emma didn't need revenge. She only needed the truth. And tonight, it had spoken loud enough. The room stayed frozen. No one moved, No one even breathed. The words "my wife, co-founder" still hung in the air like thick smoke. Emma stood calmly beside Alex, the crystal of her champagne glass catching the golden lights above, her posture poised, her face unreadable. All eyes were on her, now, the woman they had walked past for years without a second glance, the so-called quiet assistant with budget lunches and soft steps. The same woman who had once been the punchline of casual jokes. Now she was the storm they never saw coming. Alex didn't flinch either. He placed one hand gently behind her back, not to claim her, not to shield her, but simply to stand beside her. Equal. Together. Emma Brooks Miles, he repeated, slowly, letting the words sink in. Co-founder of this company, strategic architect behind several of our most successful client campaigns, and the reason Hawthorne & Miles survived its first 3 years without folding. Gasps turned into awkward shuffling. A few murmurs spread. One executive from finance actually dropped his fork. Tara, seated at a table near the bar, blinked several times as her jaw fell open. "Oh my God," she whispered. "And Brielle?" Her hand, still holding a half-empty wine glass, shook just enough for the liquid to ripple. She looked at Emma as if seeing her for the first time. And maybe she was. Emma turned slowly to face her, calm and still as ever. The last of the noise faded. With a soft, steady voice, Emma finally said, "Next time you talk about someone's paycheck, check your source." A beat. Then another, and then a few cautious laughs. Genuine this time, but restrained. Not mean. Just shocked. A release of the tension that had held everyone hostage moments before. Brielle's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for support, for someone to step in and redirect the attention. But no one came. No one could save her from the truth that had landed like thunder. Emma didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or tilt her chin in triumph. She simply turned back toward Alex, and together, they moved off the platform and rejoined the crowd. But nothing was the same. People stared, some with awe, some with guilt, some with a flicker of admiration. Emma exchanged polite smiles. She didn't stop to explain, didn't rehash the timeline or parade her achievements. She let the silence speak for her. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for validation, because it already knows its worth. Brielle, still frozen, finally excused herself and slipped out of the room. No one followed. In the minutes that followed, small clusters formed across the ballroom. Quiet conversations buzzed. "She's been here this whole time? And we never knew? She handled the Eco-Earth project, didn't she? That campaign was brilliant. I think she fixed the midpoint budget when the numbers went south last fall." Emma heard them, but didn't react. She wasn't there for praise. She had never been. Later that night, after the gala thinned out and the jazz band packed their instruments, Emma and Alex stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights blinked around them, a quiet contrast to the storm they had just walked through. Alex held her hand loosely as they walked toward the waiting car. "I know you didn't want the spotlight," he said softly. "I still don't," she replied. He glanced over. "Then why tonight?" Emma paused, watching the wind catch the hem of her dress. "Because someone needed to remember that kindness isn't weakness," she said, "and silence doesn't mean ignorance. I've built too much to let it be stepped on without consequence." Alex smiled faintly. "You sure you're not running for office?" She gave a small laugh. "God, no. One reveal per lifetime is enough." He opened the car door for her. As she slipped in, she looked back once at the glowing hotel entrance, still buzzing faintly with scattered guests and whispers. Let them talk. Let them finally see. The woman they had ignored was never small. She had only chosen not to roar. Until now. Monday morning came with the usual rush, elevator chimes, the whir of printers, and the hiss of the espresso machine near the break room. But there was a different energy on the 17th floor now. Conversations were quieter. Eyes lifted more quickly when the elevator doors opened. Whispers faded mid-sentence when she walked by. Emma stepped into the office with the same grace she always had. No entourage, no change in wardrobe, no flash. Just her favorite tailored blazer, clean white blouse, hair tucked neatly behind her ears. The only new thing, the nameplate now installed on the office door just beside the conference room. Emma Brooks Miles, Executive Consultant, Strategic Division. The whispers hadn't stopped all morning. Did you see her walk in? She's not even walking differently. She's probably the most powerful person in this building now, and she still carries her lunch. Emma didn't correct them. She let them say what they needed to say. She walked past the desks, offering a warm good morning to the same people who weeks ago barely looked her way. Some responded with wide smiles. Others looked sheepish, and she noticed, but she didn't let it show. When she reached her new office, Tara was already waiting at her door, nervously holding a stack of reports. "Morning, Emma. I mean, Mrs. Miles? Or, Mrs. Consultant?" Emma chuckled softly and took the files. "Emma is flushed." "Right. Sorry. Force of habit. Also, welcome back." Emma nodded once, a genuine smile forming. "Thank you." She spent the first hour reviewing briefs and cross-referencing internal reports, fingers moving quickly over her laptop. It felt good. Not because it was different, but because it was honest now. No hiding, no layers. A quiet knock came. Alex stepped in, carrying 2 coffees, wearing the same tailored suit he always did. But there was something new in the way he looked at her. Like the formality of their public boundary had finally relaxed. "Thought I'd bring you something," he said, placing the cup gently on her desk. Emma glanced up from her screen. "Make your own coffee today," she said with a teasing smile. That was the deal. Alex smirked and raised his hands in surrender. "Just trying to be supportive." "You are," she said softly. "Just don't act like I've suddenly become someone else." "You haven't," he agreed. A pause passed between them, familiar, full of ease. "Also," he added, "the board sent a memo this morning. Internal audit findings came in." Emma leaned back slightly. "Let me guess. Plagiarism confirmed. Budget manipulation traced. Team complaints corroborated." Alex nodded. "All of it." Emma didn't look surprised, just tired. "Brielle?" "Demoted. Reassigned to admin oversight in a different branch. No more creative authority. HR will finish the paperwork today." Emma sat quietly for a moment. "I don't want her fired." "I know. It's not about ruining her. She just needed to learn." "She will," Alex said. Emma turned back to her screen. "Then, it's enough." The door clicked shut behind him. Later that afternoon, the leadership team gathered for their monthly roundtable. Emma took her seat at the head, not because it was symbolic, but because it was where she belonged. As ideas flowed, she listened more than she spoke, letting others contribute freely. But when she did speak, the room stilled. Her points were clear, measured, and strategic. She didn't dominate. She led. Afterward, junior staff hovered awkwardly outside her office with questions. Nervous, deferential, unsure. Emma welcomed them in, answered patiently, and asked for their names even if she already knew them. She made notes, gave suggestions, and thanked them for their work. She didn't change her voice. She didn't raise it. But somehow, the entire office was quieter, more focused, more alert. By the end of the week, the break room fridge had labels again, the morning meetings started on time, and even the Slack channels felt more respectful. No one said it aloud, but the shift was clear. She wasn't a shadow anymore. She was the storm that had swept through, not to destroy, but to clear the air, and then rebuild. On Friday evening, as the lights dimmed and the office emptied, Emma stayed behind for a few minutes, looking out the large window that overlooked the city skyline. Below, cars moved like tiny lights in lines. Quiet, rhythmic, steady. She didn't need applause. She didn't need revenge. She had the truth, her integrity, and a company she helped build back in her hands. As she packed her bag to leave, a text popped up. "Alex, dinner out? I promise not to talk about work." She smiled and typed back, "Only if you let me order dessert first." The elevator doors closed behind her. The office floors faded into quiet, and Emma Brooks Miles walked out, not a woman who had emerged from someone else's shadow, but the woman who had been holding the light all along.